Hello and welcome back, unless you've never been here, and then welcome to the channel. This is Full Stack with Lawrence, nighttime edition, and you're about to see programming tip number 3 of my 26-part series on Open edX plugins. Today we're talking about Python decorators, and I'm going to show you 10 interesting Python decorators. Half come from inside of the Open edX code base itself, and the other half primarily are Django decorators that are extensively used inside of the code, and one bonus decorator, and you have to wait to the end of the video to see that one, but it's the bestest. All right, so let's get into it. Let's go in here. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to open up the edX platform code base, and decorator number 1 is called course author access required, and as the name would imply, it's going to ensure that the user that is embedded inside of this request object is in fact a user who has been delegated authority to access course content. It's what you would do with Course Management Studio. And if they don't, then it's going to create a Python exception. All right, moving on. Decorator number 2, request cached. This is a little used decorator, but it's interesting. The reason it's little used, I'm not going to talk about it too much, just take note it's used about a dozen times. And the reason that it's only used a dozen times is because it is superseded by this decorator called cache control. And the difference is that cache control provides you the ability to configure the behavior in many ways of the caching behavior of the thing that you're caching. Now, in all cases, what you're caching is the HTTP response that goes with the HTTP request that's being passed in. And so you've got in the cache, Redis, you've got the HTTP headers, the body, the works, everything's in there. And so it's huge. Decorator number 3 is called ensure valid course key, and as the name would imply, it's anticipating seeing an input parameter whose name is course_ID, and when it finds that, it's also anticipating that that's going to be a string value, and it's going to ensure that the course key represented by that string value is in fact a course that's in your course catalog. And so its implementation is specific to your Open edX installation. That's pretty cool. The 5th and last decorator that comes directly from edX platform is this here. Expect JSON. You see, it's only used a couple of times. However, it's super cool, and so I want you to be aware of it. So expect JSON, as the name would suggest, is going to validate the HTTP request body and ensure that it's a valid JSON object. And if it's not, then it's going to generate a Python exception. Python decorators 6 through 9 come from the Django library. However, they're extensively used inside of the edX codebase, and so I want you to see these. Require HTTP methods will accept any valid HTTP method type. So you see get and post here, there's patch, delete, and so on. And what it'll do is ensure that this request object is implementing a method that's inside of that list. And if not, you guessed it, get a Python exception. Decorator number 2 from Django is ensure CSRF cookies. That means cross-site request forgery. Here's what it does, and it's kind of cool, is it will ensure that the browser that's interacting with your code has a valid cross-site request forgery cookie generated by this platform, and if it doesn't, it'll create one. And so this, well, read up on cross-site request forgery, and you can see why that's important. You can see, just suffice it to say, it's used pretty extensively in the code, and so take that as a hint from the engineers at Open edX. Decorator number 3 of Django is login required, and this is probably the most extensively used decorator in the entire code base. So as the name might maybe suggest, is for the user who's interacting with your code, if they're not authenticated, then this will generate a 301 redirect to the login page once they've authenticated, redirect them back to from whence they once came and continue the thread of execution. So it's really powerful, which is why it's used extensively in the code base. The receiver Python decorator. The receiver Python decorator is so important that a couple of years ago, I wrote an extensive blog article about this decorator and how it's used specifically inside of Open edX software. So assuming that you haven't seen that blog article just yet, here's how it's used with Open edX software. The decorator itself is part of Django's event-driven programming model, and so it works in conjunction with a publish decorator. And what you do is you create unique names, which in the case of edX are manifested as constants. So our constant course pacing changed, it resolves to a string literal. And in any case, anywhere in the platform where there's a publish signal using that string literal, it's going to cause that signal to be received right here and anywhere else that's been placed in the code base, and that code will execute in turn. So it's like, in a sense, it's just your basic event-driven programming model, but it's really simple, very powerful, and when you combine that capability with Open edX plugin architecture, you have an amazing strategy for consolidating all of your custom feature modifications into a single Open edX plugin, and that keeps your platform upgradable. It helps you to avoid forking the code base, and that's fantastic. All right, so that's everything for Django and for Open edX software, but I got one bonus decorator for you. And this one does not appear in this code, and so I'm going to show it to you like this. So it's called the secure logger, and it's used like the following. Just take note of its name, and I will bring to your attention the following: that secure logger is used several times inside of the Open edX example plugin, and that's the plugin that's the basis for all 26 of these coding techniques. And so it's already been set up for you, and you get some great examples, but here's the gist of what it does. The secure logger, as the name would suggest, is for generating application log data just using the standard Django logging libraries. But the difference is that the secure logger does two things. It will pretty print the call that it's decorating and all of the input parameters and their values. And so rather than just putting, like a ping inside of an application log to indicate, yeah, the thread of execution passed through here, you get this nicely formatted dump of the def itself and everything that was passed into it in a pretty printed format. So that's kind of cool. But the real power is that any parameters that secure logger recognizes, like in this case, the parameter AWS access key ID, it will mask that value to ensure that that sensitive data does not inadvertently leak into your application logs, which if they found themselves out in the wild for any reason, would put your credentials and other sensitive data at risk. And so this is a fantastic way to go the extra mile to ensure that your credentials stay safe, and it'll make your clients more confident in your deployments. It'll make you a better CI/CD engineer, and just everybody wins. All right, cool. That's everything. Hope you found that helpful, and if you did, please consider subscribing to this channel and liking the video, because that helps with the algorithm and all that stuff. And all right, I will see you in the next video.